Sometimes we save the best for last. From Città di Soave, live, the youngest of the Tessari, Alessandra, is going to tell us what I've been trying to say to people since 2011. This is not Soave, it's Suavia.
Exactly.
Alessandra, we learned from your website that Suavia is a story of a castle, no frogs, very few princes, and a lot of princesses. But I also heard a rumor that one of the princes tried to kiss a frog, and the frog, instead of turning into a beautiful prince, it turned into something far more beautiful, a bottle of Monte Carbonare, which you guys can see behind my back. Is that true or not? Or,
I mean, that's an interesting version.
But, anyway, all kidding aside, Alessandra, explain where you are in the heart of the Soave Classico and what made Soavia so far.
Yeah, so hi everybody. First of all, I'm presenting here today, of course, our family winery, Suavia, and 3 of our wines. So when we speak about our winery, we are speaking about a small family winery that works and produces wines in the very heart of the Soave Classico denomination. As you probably know already, when we speak about Suave, we speak about a very, very large area of production of white wines, northeast Italy, very close to the city of Verona, right in the middle, between the cities of Verona and Vicenza. And it's a very broad area. So we're speaking about 7,000 hectares of vineyards. But in this very, very big area of production of white wines, we are in the classical part of this area, which is just a small part, the part where actually viticulture started here. So where historically people started to plant vines and produce wine. So when we speak about Soave Classico, we speak about just less than 1/3 of the total denomination, and is just on the hills. So when we say hills, we are speaking about a 300 meters volcanic, mainly volcanic hills, and with completely, totally different conditions of what we have down in the flat, on the valley. So when we speak about Soave, we always have to make these distinctions. So they really exist 2 different faces of the same denomination. And so you can get some very easy, cheap Soave wines from the valley, and some other kind of Soave that mainly comes from the hills of the Classico area, but also other hills here around. And they are completely different from the quality point of view, and of course also for the kind of work we do here, because here you can imagine these high volcanic hills where it's impossible to use any kind of machine. So every part of our work is basically manual, completely different costs that we have to produce our wines here. So this is very important. This is a difference that we really need to transmit to people, and they need to understand it, because of course when the consumer is on the market, it finds on the shelves Soave, but completely different kind of Soave. So they find a bottle that costs $1, $2, $3, very cheap, very easy wine, and next to it a bottle that costs $10, $12, $20, and it wonders why. That's exactly why, because we have 2 different part of the denomination and 2 different ways to work. So,
sorry, Alessandra, you mentioned, and this is something, of course, we have learned, but for some people that hasn't yet, or they're listening to us, normally when people talk about volcanic soil, they expect to see the cone expect to see the volcano. Can you talk about your volcanic soil that is so old that you don't see the cone anymore?
Yes, well, actually, if they were here 50 million years ago, they would probably see the cone, but now it's not there anymore. At least now it is a hill that we see here in the background. But exactly, well, the hills, the volcanic soil that we have here was formed 50 million years ago. So we're speaking about prehistory, of course, and all the area here was very similar of what is the Hawaii now, basically. So tropical ocean and all these volcanoes, which were mainly under the sea, and with their explosions, they created all the hills that we have here. So where we plant vines now, they are actually some kind of pyramids of all the stuff that came out from all these old volcanoes. So they're made of dried lava, which is basalt, the black basalt. I have one here to show you. The black basalt is the lava, basically dried lava, and it's our main rock. And also we have, of course, pumices, ashes, all the stuff that came out from these volcanoes and created all the hills here. So it's not like, you know, it's not like some very young volcanic soils like you can have on Etna, for sure, but they are very ancient, and this is not something bad, because to say the truth, it's very interesting, because through the centuries, these volcanic soils and their components, they had the time to develop, and all the chemical substances had the time and the chance to break down. And so they are now far easier to be sucked from the vines. So it's a very interesting kind of soil that we have in the area here. And all of our vineyards, we are speaking about 22 hectares of vineyards, are based on volcanic soil. So in all the wines we have, you can have this volcanic sensation.
So how did the story start, Alessandra? I mean, your family been growing grapes for centuries.
Yes.
At some point.
Exactly. So, well, part of our vineyards, the one that we actually inherited from our family, we don't even know
how long
when they are dated, how long they are part of the family, you know. So our family has always been involved in viticulture. They have always owned land here in the Suavia Classical Hills. So my grandfather, his grandfather, they all were grape growers, basically. The big change was made by my parents. So my father, together with my mother, they decided to stop, just grow the grapes and then sell them to the other wineries or big cooperatives in the area, and start to make their own wines. So it was 1982, they decided to call this new winery Suavia, after the old original name of the town of Suave. So they wanted to really to underline the strong link, the strong relationship that exists between the winery and its wines and the territory itself. And then, of course, they were lucky enough to have 4 daughters, all females. So we always say, you can imagine Italy in the 80s, 70s, 80s. So everybody was telling my father, no future for your winery at all, because, of course, all women in agriculture, you know, no future. And so, we proved them that they were wrong, and in 2000 we took over from our parents. My father was a pensioner already, so we were ready, because Valentina, our sister, which is the winemaker, she was just graduated at the University of Milan. She had some experiences as well, and so she started to produce wines from the 2000 vintage. It was her very first vintage, and so we started to manage the wineries as sisters from that year in particular. So now it's almost 20 years this year.
A full matriarchate. Yes. Well, because, you know, sometimes you have requests, if there's a female ownership, there's a female winemaker or any female in the winery. With Suavia, we have them all.
Yes.
We have female properties, female winemaker, expert manager, everybody.
Girl power.
Yes, it makes us very happy. All right.
So, yes, well, then, of course, when the original idea of our parents was, as I told you before, they choose the name Suavia because they wanted the winery to be very, very linked with the territory itself. And so they started to produce only Suave wines from the most interesting part of these volcanic hills. And we wanted to continue this family tradition. So still now, we are producing only white wines, and we really underline these facts because we want people to know that we are specialized in the production of Suave wine. So we are really specialists in these kind of wines, and we are in the very heart of the denomination, and there is no sense for us to produce anything else. So everything we produce are white wines and Suave wines from the two indigenous varieties of Suave. So Garganega, which is the queen of the denomination, the main grape variety, and then Trebbiano di Suave, which is the other indigenous one.
So going into the princess story, what was the first wine? Of course, I'm assuming Suave Classico. And then can you tell us what came during this path?
Exactly.
When you...
So yes, so the three wines we are showing today are the Suave Classico, which is, I hope, yes, you can see it. It's 2019 vintage, is the new one. So it was released in mid-February this year. Then we are gonna have Monte Carbonare, new vintage as well. This is brand new, 2018. So our original idea was to present this wine during Vinitaly, and we are now presenting during Vinitaly at home, which is almost the same. And then Massifiti, which is the Trebbiano di Suave, new vintage as well, 2017, that we started to sell last year in September. So it's few months, which is in the market already. So yes, so we start from Suave Classico. We are very happy with this Suave Classico this year because it's, well, 2019, as you probably know already, was a very, we can say poor vintage, because especially if we compare it with the previous one, which was 2018, a very rich and generous vintage. And you know that with nature and viticulture is always like this. You can have like top, very rich vintages every year. It's impossible because vine can't stand that standard, you know. And so when you have a very rich year, probably the year next will be a little bit poorer. So that's the case of 2019. We also had some problems at the beginning of the vintage because of some hailstorm that hit some of our vineyards in some parts of the Classico areas. And it was a very particular effect because it came in a very strange period and a very dangerous one as well, because it came at the beginning of May, when you have all the tender sprouts on the vine, and so many of them were damaged at the beginning. And so we didn't really have problems from the quality point of view, because of course the grapes were not formed already, but we had some problems with the quantities, of course. And so we can say that we had probably a 15–20%
Less.
damage less, yes, in the production. So, well, anyway, this led on the other side, on the quality side, to a bigger concentration of the elements in the grapes that were left. And so what we have also in the Suave Classico, which is, as you know, our basic wine, even if I always say it's a little bit unfair to call it basic because it's not that basic from the quality point of view. But this year in particular, we have such a concentration, which is very, very interesting. And so also from the color, I want to show the color, which is very particularly intense. And it's probably
wow, and beautiful.
It's probably because of this concentration we had in the grapes themselves. So more extracts, more substances. Also the nose, it's very, very expressive, and it mixes, as always, all the volcanic flavors like flintstone and volcanic, like the not the ashes, but the sulfur that you get normally in this kind of wines, with some mature fruits, white flowers, so very interesting flavors that you can find in this vintage as well. So yes, some questions, or it's...
We're doing questions at the end, Alessandra. People are sending questions in writing that I can see those, and at the end we will ask.
Perfect. So we go on with Monte Carbonare.
Yes, ma'am. And tell us the story about this one, because I was saying before, we know you started with Suave Classico, but when did you introduce Monte Carbonare? Besides my stupid story of the frog turning into this bottle, what is the thinking behind? When did you guys start to think about making a single vineyard and so on? Before, of course, you present the vintage as well.
Yes. So Monte Carbonare for us is the we can say the flagship wine. So really the wine that made our winery famous, because it's so it comes from this very particular part of the hill, and the name itself tells the characteristic of this part of the hill. So Monte, as you know, in Italian means hill, and Carbonare comes from the Italian word carbone, which is carbon, coal. So the hill of coal, namely, and that's because of the color of the soil. So again, the black basalt that I showed you before, this one, as you can see, the color is black, exactly as the label, which is a little bit unusual to find white wines in a black label. But this is a black label because it really reminds the color of the soil in that particular part of the hill, because of the big concentration of basalt rocks, and you get the sensation of walking on coal when you enter these vineyards. Another interesting fact about Monte Carbonare is that where we have our vineyards in the Monte Carbonare, it's a very cool position we have. It's northeast facing, and so years ago, 20–30 years ago, this particular position was considered a bad position, so not very good for the grapes, because it was in the shadow, and a very cool position, so you couldn't have the perfect maturation of the grapes on time. And this area, to say the truth, was an area which was covered by woods for many years, because people didn't want to plant any vine there because of the weather condition there. So in the vineyards of Monte Carbonare that we have now, in this vineyard we have some 45–50 years old vines, even some 60 years old ones. It depends on the part of the hill, because we have 6 hectares total, so it invests different parts of the hills. And they were planted later than other areas. And the funny fact is that now, in the last 10, 15 years, people find out that this position, the one of Monte Carbonare, is probably one of the most interesting now with the global warming and the changing of weather. We have hotter and hotter summers, and in the Monte Carbonare area, we have some perfect conditions for the growing of grapes. We don't have any lack of water, so we don't basically have irrigation system there, because they don't need any kind of irrigation. And another interesting fact is that these vineyards, which are surrounded by woods, because the area is very close to many woods, they have a kind of soil which is very, very rich in substances, because of course the volcanic basalt mixed together with the typical soil from the woods, which is very rich in organic matter. And so we have some perfect ground for the growing of the vine. So from a difficult position to a very interesting one in 20, 30 years. So that's another interesting thing about this particular position and this particular cru. Monte Carbonare is a wine that we produce and we make in steel tanks only. So if you know our wineries, our winery already, you know that we use few woods, only for the late harvest and the sweet wine, the recioto, but for the majority of the other wines, we prefer to use stainless steel, because we really think that we need to find a way to let people get in contact with the real matter of this wine. So we don't need any influence by wood or other strange enological technique.
Alchemy.
Yes, we need to, we want to maintain the wines very pure and very clean. That's our style, and to do so we mainly use stainless steel. So 12 months in Surly, in steel vats, another 6 months at least of fining in the bottle before we release it. We are now speaking about the 2018 vintage, brand new. So it's gonna be in the market in these weeks. Another interesting vintage, as I told you before, is right the opposite as 2019. So far more generous, of course, but as you know, in the hills, it's difficult to have that big quantities of grapes anyway. So we have some rocky soils, we have some particular weather condition, we have some particular way to work in the vineyards, and so you can get all those rich harvest you can have in the valley, for example. So it was rich but also very well balanced as a vintage. So we had some perfect weather during the summer, we had some sun but not too much, so we can say it was a very balanced vintage, and this balance you can taste this balance also in the wine in a way.
We love that Cinderella story, going back to the castle and princess and frog. We love the Monte Carbonare. That was a sort of Cinderella. Nobody wanted to plant it there before, and now everybody does. How many hectares of vineyards you think are planted there, besides your own? Do you have neighbors? And
in the Carbonare area?
Yes.
Yes, so the total area of Carbonare is 30 hectares. Slightly more, 40, 45 probably hectares total. We have 6 of them in a specific in the in the eastern part of Monte Carbonare. So it's a larger area. So now another interesting thing is that so this project started last year with the consortium of Suave. They started a project to divide all the area in the area of Suave Classico mainly in some crews. So they did some geographic divisions to underline the differences between all the crews and the areas in the Suave Classico appellation. And so, and from next year, since 2019 vintage, we will have a regulation in the naming of the wines in the bottle. So Monte Carbonare, for example, will be the name of one of these specific areas which were recognized and signed by the consortium. And you will have to prove the origin of the grapes to write the name Carbonare on your label. And that's a very interesting thing. And I think it's going to be very interesting for the consumers as well, because they're going to have a way to be sure about the product they are going to buy. And so, of course, from next year, from the next vintage, 2019, all the grapes which will go inside the Monte Carbonare bottle, they will be tracked and certified in a way from the consortium. So this is another very interesting thing that the consortium is doing to give more instruments to the consumers and also to the producers to better understand the area itself and their characteristics depending on the size of the hills.
Beautiful. Flavor profile from this bottle?
Of Monte Carbonare, well, it's, I show you.
Yeah, make us jealous. Shows. What it is, Tuesday at Vinitaly, so that probably would be the day that we were at your stand over there tasting this wine, right?
So the perfect timing.
Yeah.
So Monte Carbonare. Huh? What, sorry?
No, I said that normally we come on a Sunday or on a Tuesday at your stand. So today probably would have been the day that we were there tasting this beautiful wine.
Okay, so that you probably are tasting this Monte Carbonare, which is 2018 vintage, is new. And so here we have, as always, the this very concentrated and volcanic flavor that comes out, but together with the fruits as well. But the flavors you have here in the Carbonare are much more like mature than the ones you have in the Suave Classico. So in the Suave Classico, you had the fresh flavors, the perfect, summer wine, the very easy young wine. Here, you start to understand what is the evolution in this kind of wine. So these wines can age very, very well. And when they age exactly with this trend, the trend of Monte Carbonare. So they start to lose a little bit the floral, fruity part, which is very, very rich in the Suave Classico, in the young wine. And what becomes stronger is the volcanic part. So here you really smell this flint stone, these sulfur notes. They are stronger and more clear at the nose. And then the acidity it has in the mouth, which is very interesting as well. It combines, of course, acidity with some body, because it's a very round wine. So when it enters the mouth, you get, of course, the acidity, but you also get this feeling of roundness in a way. So it covers all the palate. is the perfect wine. You can pair with all the fish, but not only the fish, because it really can stand also some strong flavors like the ones of mushroom, some truffle as well. So you can do some interesting pairings also with some elaborate dishes with Monte Carbonara.
Beautiful. Thank you, Alessandra.
You're welcome. Last one that we present today is Massifitti. So Massifitti, we have 2017 vintage. Yes, we were speaking about Cinderella before. I think it is even more Cinderella than Monte Carbonara, because here we're really speaking about that. We're speaking really about a wine that is made with a particular grape variety, which is Trebbiano di Soave. And it's very, very unusual to have 100% Trebbiano di Soave pure vinificated alone as a single grape variety, because in the area Garganega is the queen, the main grape variety. Trebbiano di Soave has always been considered a second blend variety, used for blending with Garganega, so almost never used alone. Here we have a wine that was made with this old ancient grape variety, which was taken from us from the old vines and then recuperated and cloned in other new vines. And we started to produce this wine for the first year in 2008. The main characteristic of this grape variety of Trebbiano di Soave is the bright acidity it has. So also here in this vintage 2017, which was a difficult one from some point of view, especially during the summer, which was a very hot one. Even here in this vintage, we have a very, very high acidity levels and this bright acidity. So it's really a wine which is which you can use many different ways as well. It's perfect with the fish, of course, all the raw fish in particular, like oysters, like also the Japanese cuisine, sushi, sashimi, this kind of food. And yes, it's interesting and unusual at the same time.
Beautiful. Flavor profile, color.
Yes, I show you now.
Facci sognare, make us dream, you know.
So, let me, you see it better in this way. So again, it's a straw yellow, and then here, so what you have here, for me, Massifitti is even more expressive. I mean, if we speak especially about the volcanic profile, the volcanic flavor is even more expressive than Monte Carbonara, because in Monte Carbonara we have the Garganega grape, which is not considered as an aromatic variety, but it is in a way. So it really has some interesting flavors. And so with these flavors, it covers a little bit the volcanic notes, and it changed them a little bit. When we speak about Trebbiano di Soave, we speak about a variety. It's a brother, genetically speaking, of the Verdicchio from Le Marche. So it's a variety that is not very aromatic, not very expressive from the aromatic point of view. And thanks to this thing, it is very kind of transparent on the terroir itself. So what comes out is the terroir, mainly. So here you can really have these volcanic flavors very strong, and it changes completely in the mouth, because the mouth it's like, you know, laser beam, straight acidity. It's very, very clean and very pure in the taste. And as you see, we are tasting, yes, I am tasting, but I'm presenting 3 different years, 3 different vintages here. So 2019, 18, 17. So Massifiti is the one with the longer vinification we have. And that's because Trebbiano di Soave needs time, even more than Garganega, because of this strong acidity test. We need time to make it a little bit smoother, and also it really needs time to develop all these volcanic flavors, because they are probably the ones that have a more evolution in time. So this is a wine, as well as Monte Carbonare, but this one in particular with the strong acidity test is a wine for aging. So don't be afraid to have to sell an older bottle of Massifiti. It's gonna be better and better year after year.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Alessandra.